Previously in part 1, Zuri Adeyemi stepped into Woojin's world seeking justice, not desire. But when her touch awakened a reaction in him he hadn't felt in years. Their fates tangled together, in danger, in obsession, and in secrets neither of them was ready to face. While Woojin battled feelings he couldn't understand, Zuri dug deeper into the shadows of his organization until she uncovered the file that shattered everything. Her brother's death wasn't an accident. The true enemy was far more powerful than she imagined. And worst of all, Zuri is the next target. Tonight, 6 p.m., at her home. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, make sure you do so first so you don't get lost. And don't forget to subscribe. Part 2 goes darker, deeper, and far more intense than anything before. Now, let's dive in. The world stopped. Time fractured into sharp, jagged pieces, each second cutting deeper than the last. Zuri stared at the screen of the encrypted phone, her hands trembling so violently that the device nearly slipped from her grip. The words blurred and refocused, as if her brain was refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. Target, Zuri Adeyemi. Date today. Time 6 p.m. Location, apartment 804, Hannam Dong. Status, confirmed. Method, capture alive. Interrogation priority, disposal after extraction. Her apartment, her home, the place where she'd cried over Kofi's death, where she'd planned her revenge, where she'd foolishly believed she was safe. Zuri's breath came in short, sharp gasps that burned her lungs. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest. The phone's blue light illuminated her face in the dim corner of the building's stairwell, where she ducked to read Woojin's message. And now that light felt like a spotlight marking her for death. Capture alive. That was worse. So much worse than a clean kill. They wanted information. They wanted to know what she'd discovered, who she'd told, what evidence she had. And they would hurt her, torture her to get it. Zuri's vision swam. The walls of the stairwell seemed to close in, the concrete pressing against her from all sides. She pressed her back against the cold wall, her cream blouse now wrinkled and damp with sweat, her black pencil skirt restricting her movements as panic clawed its way up her throat. Check the time. Check the time. Her shaking fingers fumbled with her watch. The delicate gold piece Kofi had given her for her 25th birthday, back when he was still alive, back when the world made sense. 5:47 p.m. The numbers on the screen seemed to pulse with malicious intent, each digit a countdown to her death. Zuri's mind raced through impossible calculations. How long would it take to get to her apartment from here? 15 minutes in traffic? Maybe 10 if she ran every red light. But what would be the point? They were waiting for her there, expecting her. She thought about her apartment with sudden, piercing clarity. The little balcony where she drank morning coffee and talked to her mother on the phone, lying about how well she was doing in Seoul. The bookshelf filled with Kofi's old journalism textbooks that she'd shipped from Lagos, unable to part with them. The bedroom where she'd cried herself to sleep so many nights, missing her brother, missing home, missing the version of herself that had existed before grief had carved her hollow. All of it was a trap now. Her home had become her execution site. Zuri's free hand pressed against her chest, feeling the rapid hammer of her heart. She'd always thought she'd be brave when death came. Kofi used to joke that she had more courage than sense, charging into arguments she couldn't win, defending causes that were already lost. But this wasn't bravery she felt now. This was pure animal terror, the kind that turned her blood to ice and her thoughts to static. She thought of her mother back in Lagos, who'd already buried one child. What would it do to her to bury another? Would Chairman Kang even return Zuri's body, or would she simply disappear like so many others who'd crossed powerful men? Would her mother spend the rest of her life wondering, hoping, waiting for a daughter who would never come home? No, Zuri thought fiercely. No, I am not dying in a foreign country for a man's secrets. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice, about truth, about making sure Kofi's death and her own potential death meant something. 13 minutes. She had 13 minutes before armed killers descended on her apartment. But she wasn't at her apartment. She was still here, at Woojin's building, 5 floors below street level in the parking garage stairwell, frozen in shock. Move, her brain screamed. Move, move. But her legs wouldn't obey. Her body had locked up, every muscle seized with terror. Because the implications were crashing over her like waves, each one more devastating than the last. Chairman Kang knew. He knew she'd accessed the files. He knew she'd discovered the truth about Kofi's death. He knew Woo Jin had been protecting her, and now he was eliminating the evidence. Eliminating her. "Oh God," Zuri whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh God, oh God." Her phone, her regular phone, not Woo Jin's encrypted one, buzzed in her purse. She yanked it out with trembling hands. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, almost threw the phone away and ran. But some terrible instinct made her swipe to accept the call. "Miss Adeyemi." The voice was smooth, cultured, speaking Korean with the refined accent of old money and older power. "I hope you're having a pleasant evening." Ice flooded Zuri's veins. She knew that voice. She'd heard it once before, weeks ago, during a meeting at Woo Jin's office. An older man, silver-haired and distinguished, who'd smiled at her with grandfatherly warmth and asked her name, complimented her Korean, told her she was doing excellent work. "Chairman Kang?" Zuri's voice came out as a strangled whisper. She cleared her throat, forced strength she didn't feel. "Who is this?" A soft chuckle. "You know who I am, my dear. Just as I know exactly who you are. Kofi Adeyemi's little sister. Such a tragedy, what happened to him. He was a talented journalist. Too talented, perhaps." Zuri's free hand clenched into a fist, nails digging into her palm hard enough to draw blood. "You killed him." "I did what was necessary to protect my interests," Kang said, his tone still pleasant, conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "Your brother made the unfortunate choice to dig where he shouldn't have dug, and now it seems you've inherited his curiosity. Tell me, Miss Adeyemi, what did you find in Woo Jin's files?" "Nothing," Zuri lied, her heart hammering. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please." Kang's voice sharpened, losing its grandfatherly warmth. "Don't insult my intelligence. You accessed Woo Jin's private server at 11:47 p.m. last night. You decrypted files that took me years to compile, and now you know things that make you problematic." Zuri's breath hitched. He'd been monitoring her, watching her. Probably had cameras in Woo Jin's office, keyloggers on his computers, eyes everywhere. "Here's what's going to happen," Kang continued, his voice dropping to something cold and final. "My associates are going to visit your apartment at 6 p.m. If you're smart, you'll be there waiting. Cooperate, answer my questions honestly, and I promise your death will be quick. Painless. A professional courtesy in honor of your brother's tenacity." "And if I don't cooperate?" Zuri asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Then you'll spend the last hours of your life wishing you had." A pause. "Oh, and Miss Adeyemi, don't bother running to Woo Jin. He can't help you now. In fact, by this time tomorrow, he'll be joining you. Treason carries such severe penalties in my organization." The line went dead. Zuri stood frozen for 3 full seconds, the phone still pressed to her ear, Kang's words echoing in her mind. "He'll be joining you. Woo Jin. They were going to kill Woo Jin too." And suddenly, the paralysis broke. Zuri shoved both phones into her purse and ran. Her heels clacked against the concrete stairs as she raced upward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had to get out of the building. Had to get somewhere public, somewhere with cameras and witnesses, somewhere they couldn't just grab her off the street. She burst through the stairwell door into the parking garage and stopped. 3 men stood between her and the exit ramp. They wore dark suits, earpieces, the kind of professional security that could be legitimate bodyguards or trained killers. But the way they turned toward her in perfect synchronization, the way their hands moved toward their jackets, told her everything she needed to know. Not security. Assassins. And they'd arrived early. "Miss Adeyemi," the tallest one said in Korean, his voice flat and emotionless. "Chairman Kang would like to speak with you. Please come with us." Zuri took a step backward, her mind racing. 3 of them. 1 of her. No weapon. No training. No chance. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The man sighed. "We were hoping you'd cooperate. It would be much easier for everyone." They moved forward. Zuri ran. She spun on her heel and sprinted back toward the stairwell, but one of them was faster. His hand closed around her wrist, yanking her backward with brutal force. Zuri screamed and twisted, her other hand flying up to claw at his face. Her nails raked across his cheek, drawing blood, and he cursed in Korean, his grip loosening for just a second. Long enough for Zuri to wrench free. She stumbled, nearly falling in her heels, and made a split-second decision. She kicked off her shoes and ran barefoot across the cold concrete, heading not for the stairwell but for the maze of parked cars, ducking between vehicles, using them as cover. Footsteps pounded behind her. 2 sets. Maybe 3. Don't let her reach the street, one of them barked. Zuri's lungs burned. Her feet slapped against concrete and her heart felt like it would explode, but she kept running, weaving between cars, searching desperately for an exit, a way out, anything. A hand grabbed her ponytail. Pain exploded across her scalp as she was yanked backward, her head snapping back, and she screamed. Her hands flew up to grab the man's wrist, but he was too strong, dragging her backward, and she could smell his cologne, could feel his breath on her neck as he growled, "Stop fighting. You're only making this worse." Zuri's fingers closed around something in her purse, the encrypted phone, heavy and solid, and she swung it backward as hard as she could. It connected with his temple with a sickening crack. The man's grip loosened. Zuri twisted free and ran again, her scalp throbbing, her breath sobbing in her throat. She burst from between 2 cars and saw it. The exit ramp, daylight beyond, the street visible through the opening. Freedom. She ran harder, faster than she'd ever run in her life, her bare feet pounding against the concrete, her braids flying behind her, and she could see people on the sidewalk now, normal people living normal lives, and if she could just reach them, tires squealed. A black SUV roared up the exit ramp toward her, cutting off her escape route. Zuri skidded to a stop, her heart in her throat, and spun around. The 3 assassins were closing in from behind. The SUV blocked her path forward. She was trapped. No, 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 no! The SUV's door flew open, and Woojin stepped out. For one suspended heartbeat, Zuri thought she was hallucinating. Woojin wasn't supposed to be here. He'd been arrested. She'd seen him being dragged away by police, handcuffed, surrounded by officers. But here he was, very much free, and he looked like he'd walked through hell to get here. His expensive black suit was torn at the shoulder. Blood, she couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's, stained his white shirt. His jet black hair, usually perfectly styled, fell in disheveled strands across his forehead and over one eye. That thin scar above his eyebrow stood out starkly against his pale skin. His dark eyes, usually so cold and controlled, burned with something wild and desperate. He looked at her, really looked at her, his gaze raking over her from head to toe, taking in her bare feet, her disheveled appearance, the terror in her eyes, and something in his expression cracked. "Zuri," he breathed, and his voice broke on her name. The 3 assassins stopped, uncertainty flickering across their faces. "Boss," the tall one said carefully. "Chairman Kang gave orders." "I don't give a fuck what Chairman Kang ordered," Woojin snarled, and Zuri had never heard that tone from him before. Raw, violent, barely controlled rage. "Touch her, and I'll kill you myself." The men exchanged glances. They were Chairman Kang's people, not Woojin's. But Woojin's reputation preceded him. Even Kang's soldiers knew what he was capable of when pushed. "She has information that—" "Get out!" Woojin's hand moved to the gun at his hip, and his eyes promised death. "Now?" The assassins hesitated for one more second, then retreated toward the stairwell, melting into the shadows. They'd be back, probably with reinforcements, but for now they were gone, leaving Zuri alone with Woojin. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just stood there in the parking garage, 10 feet apart, breathing hard, staring at each other like they couldn't quite believe the other was real. Then, Woojin moved. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, and before Zuri could speak, before she could think, his arms wrapped around her and pulled her against his chest with a force that stole her breath. "Zuri," he said again, his voice muffled against her hair, and she felt him trembling. Actually trembling. "God, Zuri, I thought, when I saw the order, I thought—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Zuri's hands fisted in his torn shirt, and suddenly she was shaking too, all the terror and adrenaline and shock crashing over her at once. She buried her face against his chest and felt the rapid hammer of his heart against her cheek, felt the heat of his body, smelled sandalwood and smoke and something metallic, blood, and she couldn't tell if she wanted to push him away or pull him closer. "They were going to take me," she whispered. "They said, Chairman Kang said—" "I know." Woojin's arms tightened around her. One hand moved to cradle the back of her head, his fingers tangling gently in her braids. "I know what he said. I know what he ordered. I'm so sorry, Zuri. I'm so fucking sorry." His voice cracked on the apology, and Zuri pulled back just enough to look up at him. His dark eyes were wet. Not crying, not quite, but close. Closer than she'd ever imagined this cold, controlled man could get. "You were arrested?" she said, her voice hoarse. "I saw them take you." "I broke out." A bitter smile twisted his lips. Turns out having half the police force on your payroll has its advantages. The charges were fabricated anyway. Kang's attempt to remove me from the board before making his move on you. His hand moved from her hair to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I got your location from the phone's GPS. When I saw you were still in the building, when I realized Kang's people had moved up the timeline. He stopped, his jaw clenching, his eyes closing briefly as the thought of what almost happened was too much to bear. I'm okay, Zuri whispered. I'm okay, Woojin. You shouldn't have to say that. His eyes opened, and the guilt in them was crushing. You should never have been in danger. I should have protected you better. I should have. You did protect me, Zuri interrupted. She lifted her hand to his face, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble there, the warmth of his skin. You tried to save Kofi. You've been keeping me safe for months. You gave me the evidence I needed. It wasn't enough, Woojin said roughly. It's never enough. Behind them, in the distance, Zuri heard the wail of sirens. More police. Or maybe Kang's reinforcements. Either way, they were running out of time. We need to move, Woojin said, reluctantly releasing her. But he kept one hand on her waist, as if he couldn't bear to lose physical contact completely. I have a safe house. Somewhere Kang doesn't know about. We can regroup there, figure out our next move. Our next move? Zuri asked. Woojin, he knows everything. He knows I saw the files. He knows you've been helping me. He's going to kill both of us. I know. Woojin's expression hardened into something cold and determined, which is why we're going to kill him first. The drive to the safe house was tense and silent. Woojin drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand on his gun, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors for tails. Zuri sat in the passenger seat, her bare feet pulled up onto the seat, her arms wrapped around her knees, trying to make herself as small as possible. She kept stealing glances at him. This man who'd upended her entire world in ways she still couldn't fully comprehend. In the dim light from passing street lamps, his profile was all sharp angles and shadows, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. Blood still stained his collar, a dark reminder that he'd hurt people to get to her. Maybe killed them. She should be horrified, should be repulsed. But all she felt was a confusing tangle of gratitude and desire and fear that had nothing to do with Chairman Kang. What are you thinking? Woojin asked quietly, not taking his eyes off the road. I'm thinking about how 2 months ago, I wanted you dead, Zuri admitted. I had it all planned out. I was going to gather enough evidence to destroy you, then I was going to watch your empire burn. And now I don't know what I want. She turned to look at him fully, except to survive the night, and to make sure you survive it too. Woojin's jaw tightened. Zuri, don't, she interrupted. Don't tell me I shouldn't care about you. Don't tell me it's dangerous or foolish or that I'm making a mistake. I know all of that already. I've told myself all of that 1,000 times. Then why? Because when I saw those men in the parking garage, when I thought I was going to die, you were the person I wanted to see one more time, Zuri said, her voice breaking slightly. Not my mother. Not my friends back home. You. And I don't know what that means. And I don't know if it's real or just adrenaline and trauma, but it's the truth. Woojin was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. When I saw that hit order with your name on it, something inside me broke. I've killed men without hesitation. I've watched people die and felt nothing. But the thought of losing you, of living in a world where you don't exist, he stopped, shaking his head. I can't. I won't. Even if it costs me everything. Zuri reached across the console and placed her hand over his where it rested on the gear shift. His fingers immediately twisted to interlock with hers, holding on like she was his anchor in a storm. We're going to survive this, she said with more confidence than she felt. Both of us. Promise me something, Woojin said. What? If something happens to me, if Kang gets to me first, you run. You take the evidence, you go to the authorities I've marked as trustworthy in the files, and you don't look back. Promise me. No, Zuri said flatly. I'm not promising that. Zuri, no, Woojin. I came to Korea alone, angry, ready to die if it meant getting justice for Kofi. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not doing this alone anymore. We survive together or not at all. He glanced at her then, and something in his expression softened. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. Good thing you like stubborn women then. I don't like stubborn women. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. I'm absolutely terrified of one specific stubborn woman who makes me feel things I have no right to feel. Despite everything, the danger, the fear, the uncertainty, Zuri felt a smile tug at her lips. The great Quan Wu Jin, terrified of his secretary. Former secretary, he corrected. I think woman I'd burn down the world for is a more accurate job title now. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in Itaewon, tucked above a late-night restaurant in a building that had seen better decades. Nothing like Wu Jin's usual haunts. No marble floors, no floor-to-ceiling windows, no luxury furniture. Just a small two-room apartment with peeling wallpaper, a lumpy couch, and bars on the windows. But it was safe. For now. Wu Jin locked the door behind them, 3 separate locks plus a chain, and immediately moved to the windows, checking the street below for any sign of surveillance. Zuri stood in the middle of the small living room, suddenly aware of how she must look. Her feet were dirty and scraped from running barefoot across concrete. Her cream blouse was wrinkled and had a small tear at the shoulder. Her braids, usually neat, were disheveled from being grabbed. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling exposed and vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with physical danger. Bathrooms through there? Wu Jin said, gesturing to a door on the left without looking at her. There should be a first aid kit under the sink. Clean up your feet. I saw you were bleeding. Zuri looked down. Sure enough, small cuts decorated her soles, blood smeared across her skin. She hadn't even felt the pain until now. What about you? She asked, noting toward the blood on his shirt. Not mine. His voice was flat, emotionless, and Zuri didn't ask whose blood it was. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. In the bathroom, Zuri found the first aid kit and cleaned her feet in the small sink, hissing at the sting of antiseptic. The face that looked back at her from the cracked mirror was almost unrecognizable. Eyes too wide, skin ashen beneath her dark complexion, lips pressed into a tight line. This is really happening, she thought. Someone wants me dead. Someone wants to torture me for information and then dispose of me like garbage. Her hands started shaking again. She pressed them flat against the sink, breathing deeply, trying to center herself. She couldn't fall apart. Not now. Not when Wu Jin was out there planning their survival. Not when Chairman Kang's people could find them at any moment. Not when... A soft knock on the door. Zuri? Wu Jin's voice muffled through the wood. Are you okay? I'm fine, she lilanced. Then, can I come in? Zuri looked at herself in the mirror one more time, at her reflection, at the fear she couldn't quite hide, and unlocked the door. Wu Jin filled the doorway, and in the small bathroom, his presence was overwhelming. He'd removed his torn jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing the intricate black tattoos that covered his forearms, designs she'd caught glimpses of before but never seen fully. Dragons and flowers and Korean script winding up his skin, beautiful and deadly. His eyes found hers in the mirror, and for a moment, they just looked at each other's reflections. You're trembling, he said quietly. I'm scared, Zuri admitted. There was no point in lying. Not anymore. Wu Jin stepped into the bathroom and closed the door behind him, an action that made the small space feel even smaller, the air between them charged with something electric. I won't let him hurt you, he said, and his voice carried absolute conviction. I don't care what I have to do, who I have to kill, what I have to sacrifice. Chairman Kang will not touch you. He'll kill you, Zuri whispered. If you betray him, if you choose me over Wu Jin. I know. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. I've known that since the moment I decided to help your brother. I've been a dead man walking for 6 months, Zuri. The only question was when Kang would figure it out. Then why? The question burst from her before she could stop it. Why risk everything? Why protect me? I'm nobody, just some secretary who showed up asking questions about her dead brother. Why would you throw away your life, your power, your safety for me? Wu Jin's jaw clenched. He looked away from her reflection, staring instead at the cracked tile wall, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with an honesty that cut through all his usual control. Because you made me feel again. The words hung in the air between them. I told you about Minso, he continued quietly, about what she did, what I lost that night, but I didn't tell you about the 3 years after. About what it's like to move through the world as a ghost, to touch someone and feel nothing, to have women in my bed and feel nothing, to watch sunsets and taste food and hear music and feel nothing. He turned back to face her. Not her reflection, but the real her, and the vulnerability in his expression made Zuri's breath catch. I thought I was broken permanently, Woojin said. I thought that part of me, the part that could feel desire, connection, want, was dead. And then you touched my hand that night in the lobby, and suddenly I could feel everything. Your skin, your warmth, the way my heart sped up, the way my body responded like it was waking from a coma. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, but not quite touching, as if he was afraid of what might happen if they made contact again. You terrify me, Zuri Adeyemi, he whispered. Because for 3 years, I didn't care if I lived or died. I had nothing to lose. I was untouchable because I had no weaknesses, no soft spots for enemies to exploit. And then you walked into my office with your beautiful smile and your hidden agenda, and suddenly I had everything to lose. Suddenly, I was vulnerable again. Human again. Zuri's eyes burned with unshed tears. I don't want to be your weakness. You're not. Woojin's hand finally made contact, his palm cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. You're my strength. You're the reason I'm fighting instead of accepting my fate. You're the reason I'm willing to burn down everything I've built if it means keeping you safe. The bathroom felt too small, the air too thick. Zuri couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think past the feeling of his hand on her face, the intensity in his eyes, the confession hanging between them like something sacred and terrible. Woojin? She breathed, and she didn't know if it was a protest or a plea. I know, he said, reading the conflict in her expression. I know all the reasons we can't do this. I know you came here to destroy me. I know your brother died because of my world. I know I have blood on my hands that will never wash clean. I know. Zuri reached up and pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. Stop, she whispered. Just stop. They stood frozen like that, her fingers against his mouth, his hand on her face, their eyes locked, and Zuri felt the moment shift into something dangerous and inevitable. She should step back, should put distance between them, should remember that this man was a criminal, a killer, someone whose world had cost her brother his life. But all she could think about was the way he'd looked when he'd found her in the parking garage, wild and desperate and terrified. The way his voice had broken on her name, the way he'd held her like she was something precious and fragile that he'd almost lost, the way he'd chosen her over his own survival. Slowly, carefully, Zuri lowered her hand from his mouth, but she didn't step back. Instead, she tilted her face up toward his, her lips parting slightly, her breath mingling with his in the small space between them. Zuri. Woojin's voice was strained, his control visibly fraying. If we do this, if I kiss you, I won't be able to stop. I won't be able to pretend anymore that I can keep you at a distance for your own safety. Then don't pretend, Zuri whispered. For one suspended heartbeat, Woojin's control held. And then it shattered. His mouth crashed against hers with all the pent-up hunger and fear and desperate need of the past hours. And Zuri gasped against his lips, her hands flying up to grip his shoulders. He backed her against the sink, his body pressing against hers, one hand still cupping her face, while the other moved to her waist, fingers spreading possessively across her hip. This kiss was different from the one in his office. That had been a breaking point, an acknowledgement of desire they'd been fighting. This was surrender. This was choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. Zuri's fingers slid into his hair, tugging slightly, and Woojin made a sound low in his throat that sent heat flooding through her body. His lips moved from her mouth to her jaw, trailing kisses down the column of her throat, and Zuri's head fell back, her breath coming in short gasps. Woojin, she breathed, and his name on her lips seemed to break something else in him. He lifted her onto the edge of the sink, stepping between her thighs, and suddenly they were pressed together in a way that left no space for doubt about how much he wanted her. His hands were everywhere, her face, her hair, sliding down her sides to her hips, careful and reverent despite the hunger driving them both. Tell me to stop, he murmured against her neck. Tell me this is a mistake, and I'll stop. But Zuri couldn't, because this didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like the first honest thing that had happened between them since the moment they met. Don't stop, she whispered. Woojin's mouth found hers again, and this time the kiss was slower, deeper, more deliberate. His tongue traced the seam of her lips, and she opened for him, tasting mint and whiskey and something uniquely him. Her legs wrapped around his waist, pulling him closer, and she felt his sharp intake of breath, felt the tremor that ran through his body. His hand slid under her blouse, warm palms against her skin, and a phone rang. They both froze. The shrill sound cut through the heated atmosphere like a knife, reality crashing back over them with brutal force. Woo-jin pulled back, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers for one moment before he stepped away entirely. The loss of his warmth felt like a physical ache. "That's the emergency line," he said roughly, his voice still thick with desire. "I have to." "I know." Zuri slid off the sink, her legs unsteady, her lips swollen from his kisses. "Answer it." Woo-jin looked at her for one more long moment, conflict and want and regret warring in his expression, then left the bathroom. Zuri sagged against the sink, her hands gripping the porcelain edge, her heart still racing. She could still feel the ghost of his touch on her skin, could still taste him on her lips. "What are we doing?" she thought. "What the hell are we doing?" But before she could sort through the tangle of emotions, she heard Woo-jin's voice from the living room, sharp and urgent. "What do you mean, compromised? How many? When?" Zuri's blood ran cold. She hurried out of the bathroom to find Woo-jin pacing like a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand clenched into a fist. "No, don't engage. Fall back to position 3 and wait for my signal." A pause. "I don't care what Kang's offering. Anyone who takes his deal is a dead man. Make sure they understand that." Another pause, longer this time. "How long ago? Fuck. Okay, I'm on it. Keep the line open." He lowered the phone and looked at Zuri, and the fear in his eyes made her stomach drop. "What happened?" she asked. "Kang knows we're together," Woo-jin said flatly. "He's put out a kill order on both of us. 5 million won for whoever brings him our heads." Zuri's knees went weak. 5 million? "That's enough to make every criminal in Seoul hunt us," Woo-jin interrupted. "My own men are going to start questioning their loyalty. We have maybe 6 hours before someone takes the deal and sells out our location." "So, what do we do?" Woo-jin was quiet for a long moment, his brilliant mind clearly working through scenarios, probabilities, escape routes. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and determined. "We end this tonight," he said. "We go after Chairman Kang before he can consolidate his forces. We hit him hard, we hit him fast, and we don't stop until he's dead." "That's suicide," Zuri breathed. "Probably." Woo-jin's lips curved into a grim smile. "But it's the only move he won't expect. He thinks we'll run. He thinks we'll hide. He's wrong." Zuri moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain as she looked down at the street below. Seoul at night was beautiful, neon lights painting the darkness in shades of blue and pink and gold, people moving about their lives unaware of the drama playing out above them. She thought about those people, the couple walking hand in hand down the sidewalk, the late-night worker hurrying home, the group of young people laughing outside a convenience store. They had no idea that a few floors above them, 2 people were planning an assassination, that violence and death were being plotted in the shadows they walked through. It was strange how normal life continued, even when your own world was ending. How the city kept breathing, kept moving, kept living even while you were dying. "Do you ever regret it?" Zuri asked suddenly, not turning from the window. "The life you chose? The things you've had to do?" Behind her, Woo-jin was silent for a long moment. Then she heard him move closer, felt the heat of his body at her back though he didn't touch her. "Every day," he said quietly, "but regret doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't undo the damage. It just sits inside you like poison, slowly killing you from the inside out. Then why not walk away? You have money, resources, connections. You could disappear, start over somewhere Kang couldn't find you." "I tried that once," Woo-jin said. "After Minso, I thought about running to some island, living under a false name, pretending to be someone else. But the truth is, Zuri, there is no someone else. This is who I am. This is what I've become. Running wouldn't change that." Zuri finally turned to face him. "What if we both ran? After this is over, if we survive, what if we just left? Started somewhere new?" Woo-jin's expression was heartbreakingly sad. "You'd hate me eventually. You'd wake up one day and remember all the blood on my hands, all the lives I've destroyed, and you'd look at me with disgust instead of..." He stopped. "Instead of what?" "Instead of the way you're looking at me right now," he finished softly. Before Zuri could respond, before she could tell him that she'd already made her choice, that she knew exactly who he was and wanted him anyway, Woo-jin's phone buzzed, and everything changed. "What?" Zuri asked. "What is it?" Wordlessly, Woo-jin turned the phone toward her. It was a video file, already loading. and the sender name made Zuri's blood freeze. Chairman Kang, the video started playing automatically. The screen showed a dark room, concrete walls, industrial lighting, the kind of place where terrible things happened. And in the center of that room, seated in a chair with his hands folded calmly in his lap, was Chairman Kang himself. He looked exactly as Zuri remembered. Silver hair, distinguished features, the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms and political dinners. He smiled at the camera, grandfatherly and warm, and when he spoke, his voice was pleasant. "Hello, Woojin." "Hello, Miss Adeyemi. I assume you're watching this together. How romantic. Young love always makes me nostalgic." Woojin's hand tightened on the phone. "I wanted to show you something," Kang continued. "Something I've been saving for a special occasion, and I think this qualifies, don't you?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small and golden. A necklace. Zuri's breath stopped. She recognized that necklace. Would recognize it anywhere. It was Kofi's. The simple gold chain with a small pendant shaped like the African continent, a gift from their mother when Kofi had moved to Korea. He'd worn it every day. She'd buried it with him, placed it around his neck in the coffin, watched them lower it into the ground. "I believe this belongs to someone you knew, Miss Adeyemi," Kang said, holding the necklace up to the camera. The pendant caught the light, spinning slowly. "Your brother had excellent taste in jewelry. It's a shame he didn't have equally good judgment about which stories to pursue." Tears burned in Zuri's eyes. Woojin's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her against his side, but she barely felt it. "Now, you might be wondering how I acquired this," Kang continued. "After all, I'm told it was buried with his body, which raises some interesting questions, doesn't it?" The camera angle widened, and Zuri saw what stood behind Chairman Kang, a figure, hooded, face obscured by shadows. But the build was familiar, the height, the way he stood. "I have someone here who's been very helpful to me over the past 6 months," Kang said. "Someone who knows quite a bit about investigative journalism, about the Adeyemi family, about everything, really." The hooded figure stepped forward. Kang reached up and pulled back the hood. The world tilted on its axis. Because the face revealed was impossible. It couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of trick, some manipulation, but Zuri knew that face, had known it her entire life. The same dark eyes as hers, the same full lips, the same pattern of freckles across the bridge of his nose that he'd inherited from their father. Kofi, her brother, alive. The phone slipped from Zuri's nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was seeing. Because Kofi Adeyemi, her brother, her protector, the man she'd mourned for 6 months, the man she'd come to Korea to avenge, was standing alive and whole behind Chairman Kang, and he was smiling. "Hello, little sister," Kofi said, his voice exactly as she remembered. "I think we need to talk." The video ended, the screen went black, and Zuri's entire world shattered into pieces. And that is where part 2 ends. If your heart is pounding, if your mind is racing, if you need answers right now, then tell us in the comments. I need part 3. What do you think is going on? Why is Kofi alive? Whose side is he really on? And what will Woojin do when he finds out the truth? Make sure you're subscribed because part 3 is going to tear everything wide open.